This commander deck cost me $200, and I'm going to talk about how I made it. Hi friends, welcome back. In today's video, we'll be talking about more Magic the Gathering. If you saw my last video of my Bloomburrow Collector's Edition and Bundle unboxing, you would know that I mentioned I was seeking specifically Lumra Bellow of the Woods so I could add it to my commander deck that I'm building. Today I want to talk about my experience building my first ever deck and the process of how all that works. I know it can be very daunting for new players. I consider myself a new player. I don't think I'm ever going to get as hardcore as some people I know, but figured I would just talk about process and how I came to building a deck. So here's my box. I got this off of Amazon. It's brand Toyger. I just saw this Sakura and I just had to have it. All right, first let me get out my deck. Now, if you're here to learn how to build your very first commander deck, there are some rules you have to follow. Your commander has to be a legendary creature. It can be any color you want, but every card in the deck can only match the colors that are on your commander card. You cannot have any cards with any other color on it. Your deck must include 100 cards, including your commander, and there can be no duplicate cards in your deck. Unlike a 40 card or a 60 card deck where you can play with a bunch of the same types of cards, commander, every single card in your deck has to be different. I used to kind of be against this, but I like that because it really forces you to make a really unique deck. Now, unlike most games where all of your cards are in your deck whenever you draw, commander sits in what's called the command zone, and you can cast mana at any point to play your commander onto the board. But this means he's face up in the command zone and other players will see what your commander is, so they will already know what the abilities are. You will want to build a deck that is synergized around your commander. How do you do that? First, I am all about the aesthetics, if you don't know me by now, and I just think of a really cool creature type or set that I like, and I narrow it from there, okay? One of the things that I want to build, for instance, is a rat deck. I don't care what kind of rat it is, but I want it to be a rat deck. So when I go to build that deck, I will start with every legendary creature rat, and I will look at that from there. That helps narrow down your options quite a bit. You can also do it by mechanic. Oh, I want a landfall deck, or oh, I want an aggro deck, and you can specifically look for creatures with those mechanics. Now, I will say, for mine, I did not have a commander in mind initially. All I knew is there was a card in this deck that I played with in a 40 card draft, and that card, amongst a few others, helped me win almost every game in my draft. But I loved the deck so much and I saw so much potential in it that the mechanic alone was what kind of inspired me to make this deck. So I will show you that card. I just so happened to be inspired by the card Bosaiju Reaches Skyward. Bosaiju Reaches Skyward is a saga card, meaning each turn you will do the actions on 1, 2, and 3, and once you do step 3, you will flip it over and the ability on the back will happen. This is from the Kamigawa Neon Dynasty set, and this is the card that in my mind helped me win my games. So I knew that I wanted to build a deck heavily inspired by this. So Bosaiju Reaches Skyward says, as the saga enters and after your draw step, add a lore counter. The lore counter is what will determine which step you are on. So lore counter 1 says, search your library for up to 2 basic forest cards, reveal them, put them into your hand, then shuffle. So that gives you 2 lands. On the next one, it says put up to 1 target land card from your graveyard on top of your library, another land card. And then the third one says exile this saga, then return it to the battlefield transformed under your control. So it is transformed. And it goes to the backside. And the backside is called Branch of Bosaiju. It's an enchantment creature plant type. It has reach, and it says Branch of Bosaiju gives +1/+1 for each land you control. By the end of my game, this was a really, really tough creature. I don't think they saw it coming, and I was just in a good position to play this card, and when I played it, it became so powerful I was able to take my opponent out. Now, at the time, I did not know that this mechanic would be called landfall, or could be triggered by landfall, or that landfall was really a thing. Like, I knew it was, but I didn't. All I knew is, I wanted big, strong creatures, and I wanted something that allowed me to pull a lot of lands, and I wanted cards that allowed me to make everything stronger with my lands. That was my goal. And I wanted to be able to protect these creatures. So I wanted good counter spells. I wanted good ways to get my cards back if they were taken away. I wanted some way to protect them when they go to fight. Because let's be real, when you start playing with better people, they will see this coming. They will know it's a landfall deck as soon as you start playing. So I wanted ways to counter their counters. Lands are such an easy thing to get. You will always have lands. So I reached out to some of my friends and I did get some advice on if you just happen to know of any good cards, let me know. Anyway, so I showed my friends this card. They helped give me some ideas to start with, some places to begin. I will say, I did not pick my commander this time. My friend saw what I wanted to do and they recommended me Ashaya, Soul of the Wild. Now, Ashaya is so on brand. Why I love this deck? Big creatures and plants. I wanted this to be inspired by So Beside You Reaches Skyward, which is a tree plant type card. And what is better than this raging plant creature, okay? He's amazing. And Ashaya is a mythical legendary creature elemental type. It costs 5 mana, not crazy. Its ability says, Ashaya, Soul of the Wild's power and toughness are each equal to the number of lands you control. That's great. That's exactly what Beside You does when he turns into Beside You, Branch of Beside You. So we're already there. We already have something that I want. But what makes it better? Okay, what makes this commander? Why do I want this as my commander? Because you don't want a card. Let me tell you why you would not want a card that just has that ability. Ashaya, Soul of the Wild's power and toughness are each equal to the number of lands you control. That ability alone is great, but it only affects Ashaya. The reason this is great as a commander because you want your commanders to synergize with other creatures, with other cards. So its next ability says, non-token creatures you control are forest lands in addition to their other types. They're still affected by summoning sickness. So why this ability is so great is that not only does Ashaya become powerful with every creature that enters the board, but also any non-token creature that enters the board will trigger a landfall ability and make him stronger. And it will make any creature stronger that is based on the number of lands you control. So Branch of Beside You, for instance, will do the same thing in any other card that has power toughness equal to. So why did I want Lumra, Bellow of the Woods, in this deck so badly? Lumra, Bellow of the Woods is an elemental bear creature with, I think, vigilance and reach. She also has the ability that her power and toughness is based upon the number of lands you control. But when she enters the board, it triggers you to mill 4 cards. So that means discarding the top 4 of your library into your graveyard. Then you'll get to put any lands in your graveyard onto the battlefield. And that triggers more landfall. So Lumra is probably going to be well worth the $35 when I get to add her to this deck. But as you can see, she fits right in the bill of exactly what I'm looking for. A lovely green forest creature, tough, powerful, magical. Now we've talked about how I've picked my commander, why I wanted Lumra. Now let's move on to some sites that might be helpful to you. Some of my friends recommended EDH Rec because on there you can search your commander and then you can search by the type of mechanic you're going for with it, basically any card you like, and it will find other cards that synergize well with it. So I used this in the beginning to find a few cards that synergized well. I found a Lumra when she was a leaked card before any of the cards had been released, so I found out about her early when I was building this deck, and she's the sole reason I even found out about Bloomburrow. So if it wasn't for me working on this commander deck, I would not have known about the Bloomburrow set. So anyway, after I added all of these cards that people recommended, I kept track of them using an app called Top Decked. On Top Decked, it's free to start. You can also pay to upgrade the things that you get access to in the app, such as certain stats for your deck. But on the surface, you can see your mana curve. So you'll create a deck, you'll set your commander, and the deck will keep track of how many cards you have in it, and it'll make sure that you stay within the 100 card maximum. including your commander. And as I said, it also mentions your mana curve. Mana curve is basically what is your average mana cost of your whole deck. You want your mana curve to be like a bell. You don't want to have too many cards that are super cheap or too many cards that are super expensive. You want to have it about in the middle. I think the mana curve for my deck is somewhere between 3 and 4, so actually a lot of my cards aren't crazy expensive, but I was able to keep track of it there. It also helps you keep track of cost of your deck, so if you're trying to stay within a budget, every time you add a card on there, it'll tell you what it costs. You can set your settings in there however you like, but this is where I dumped everything. All the recommendations people gave me, all the recommendations I got from EDH Rec, and then I went and looked up cards synergizing or just cards that I liked. Cards that I knew I kind of wanted to mess around with. I wanted some anti-flying, I wanted some counter spells, I wanted some retrieval. So I threw all that in there, right? I had over 100 cards at this point. And then the process began of narrowing down to 100, which is very difficult, very difficult. So I did that. But I went through and I narrowed down myself everything. I was like, okay, this was dumb. Why did I add this? This is not useful. I have too many of this mechanic, too much of this. And then I sent this off to my friends and I said, hey, I know this is not a perfect deck right now. This is not a deck. I just want you to go through and remove anything that you think is absolutely not worth it. Like, no. Tell me at least what I should absolutely keep. So some tips my friends taught me when I sent my deck off to get them to look at it was that I need to focus more on just a few things that I want to target. For instance, I had too much anti-flying. They said anti-flying is good, but I don't need as much as I had, and I probably should have focused my efforts in other areas like finding good cards that played off landfall and protecting those cards rather than trying to find a way to target every possible enemy, right? Another thing they taught me was that if I was going to have an anti-flying card, it could not just be a simple card that had reach. Every card I get should have more of a purpose. I shouldn't just have creatures out there with a power and toughness and no real ability. I shouldn't have creatures out there that are just have reach. I should have something more than that. And as I listened to that, I found there were many cards that had reach, but also had landfall abilities on the side. One example of something I just recently added to my deck in place of Lumra for now was a different card from the Bloomburrow set, and it's Scrap Shooter, the Raccoon Boy, the creature, Raccoon Archer. He's a rare, and he has the ability of reach, but he also has the ability of gift a card. When Scrap Shooter enters, if the gift was promised, destroy target artifact or enchantment an opponent controls, and he's a 4/4. That turned out to be pretty helpful in my recent test run of this deck. Now, he's not amazing or anything, but I get a 4/4 creature for only 3 mana that has not only reach, but the ability to remove an enchantment or artifact off the board. That is already more valuable than some of the reach cards I had initially, or anti-flying cards that I had. Think stronger about the cards that you put in your deck. So I kept eliminating, I kept replacing things. I kept looking at a card and I would say, okay, I like this ability, but I want something else like it that may also have this. And there are sites out there that allow you to search for cards. I think even Top Decked allows you to search for cards based on that type of mechanic, and it'll show you other cards with that type of mechanic. And that's very helpful if you're like, okay, is there any other cards with this specific ability? Because then it can show you cards that have that ability plus other ones, and you can kind of mix and match. I will not say that this was an easy process or a quick process. It took me a few weeks to build this deck with zero knowledge going in of how to build a deck. I kind of just did this on my own, and I learned a lot through it. There's over 100 cards in this deck, so I won't be able to talk about every single one, but I can talk about a few. So first off, I'll explain the cards that I would like to replace. If any of you guys have suggestions for good cards with similar mechanics, but the art just fits better, I'm all ears. Master's Rebuke. It's an instant, 2 mana. Target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to target creature or planeswalker you don't control. Strong. Won't get rid of it unless I have something better. The art, it's not really there, you know? Overrun. This costs 5 mana. It's a sorcery. Creatures you control get +3/+3 and gain trample until end of turn. This one's strong. I'm definitely not getting rid of this one until I find something better. And I mean, I could live with a weird herd of creatures on this image, but it's a little too prehistoric feeling to me. So I also have Death's Presence. It's an enchantment. 6 mana. Whenever a creature you control dies, put X +1/+1 counters on target creature you control. X is the power of the creature that died. That is pretty good, but I'd be willing to replace this with something different if I could. That one literally just has a big spider on it and this guy falling into acid. Not at all the look we're going for, okay? This channel is all about pretty flora and fauna, and that's all I want of this deck. I just want flora and fauna, not skeletal remains of a man. There are some cards that are just too good to worry about replacing for looks. And one example is Heroic Intervention. Only 2 mana. It plays as an instant. Permanents you control gain hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. This is pretty powerful for only 2 mana. That one is going to end up staying, but it would be nice if I could have everything kind of match a creature-y plant vibe and not just whatever this Death's Presence is. So, some cool cards I have in this deck. Argothian Elder, only 4 mana, and if I tap him, I untap 2 target lands. This is cool because when he's played with my commander, not only does he already act as a land, but if I tap him, I can also untap 2 target lands. Now, I need to look up. I actually don't know if you tap him for his ability, if you can also use him as land. I feel like the consensus would probably be no, but that would be kind of cool if you could use him as a land and at the same time untap 2 other lands you've already spent. In a deck like mine where I have big creatures, I'm always going to want to have land available to me at any point. I wouldn't say he's super cheap. He's like 4 land to play him. Once he's there, you don't have to block with him. You don't have to fight with him. He can just solely be there to help you untap 2 lands each time. He's like kind of like a free land counter after you get him on the board. Forgotten Ancient. I love this card for the art. He really fits beside You Reach Skyward and Ashaya very well. Forgotten Ancient, he's a mental creature, 4 mana. Whenever a player casts a spell, you may put a +1/+1 counter on Forgotten Ancient. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may move any number of +1/+1 counters from Forgotten Ancient onto other creatures. So he starts out as a 0/3 creature. He's another one that I don't really have to do anything with. I could put him on the board and he's just free stuff. I assume when it says whenever a player casts a spell, that means any player, any spell. I will double check on this, but that's kind of OP because spell can be anything. It can be casting another creature. It could be an instant, a sorcery. I don't think lands count as spells. I could be wrong, but that's pretty good because then when it gets around to my upkeep, that's free power to some of my other creatures. He just sits there collecting strength, absorbing strength as he just sits and grows. So I like him. And I like the name Forgotten Ancient because it's like, I just imagine this old tree man sitting in the woods. Nobody pays attention to him. He's just growing old, hundreds of years, and then one day he rips himself out of the ground and starts walking through town. That's how I imagine him. That's exactly how I imagine how he will be each turn. As I said, I wanted a lot of cards that are like, destroy this, or I wanted cards that allow me to pull things out of the graveyard. So I have a few of those, not as much as I would like, because some people said pulling from the graveyard was not that important because I shouldn't be letting my stuff get to the graveyard in the first place. I don't think that's great advice, and I may revisit that if I find I need it later. But for now, I have a little of those, not very much. I have cards like Nature's Lore. It's a sorcery, 2 mana. Search my library for a forest card. Put that card onto the battlefield, then shuffle. This one's good. The key here is it says put this onto the battlefield. Just put it on the battlefield. It doesn't say put it on the battlefield tapped. So that means once you get it on the battlefield, you can use that mana that turn. That was another tip my friends recommended to me. Stay away from ones that made you tap the land when you put it on the battlefield. So that also helped me look specifically for cards that allowed land to go straight in without being tapped. And that's important because you want that land. Swiftfoot Boots says equipped creature has hexproof and haste. And this, amazing, because I can put out a big creature, then I can immediately equip him with this artifact, and then he has no summoning sickness, and I can attack with him without worries of blockers killing him or something else destroying him. Because Hexproof says it can't be the target of spells or abilities your opponents control. So that's good. That is good. You don't want to waste your use of Swiftfoot Boots. So I did keep Wildest Dreams in my deck. Now this was a gut choice. This card was... I made the independent decision to keep this card despite everyone telling me not to. They had me get rid of all my other retrieval from the graveyard, so I was like, why not? This card casts XX and 1 forest mana to cast, meaning however much I want to give, plus 1 forest. But the more that I pay for this, the better, because it's a sorcery. It says return X cards from your graveyard to your hand. Exile Wildest Dreams. X cards. X target cards. It doesn't say a specific type of card, just as many as I decide to tap. In a landfall deck, if I get this mid-game, this is good. Mid to late game, this is good. Because I can get cards out of my graveyard that I wanted and put them in my hand. Now the only caveat is you can't really have more than 7 cards in your hand by the end of your turn, so make sure whatever you get is worth it and that you can play it. So this is a good card and I'm gonna keep it because it's like worth more to me than having a bunch of different cards that allow me to retrieve from graveyard. This one, I can do it all in one if I'm able. If I play my cards right, you know what I mean? So, another thing, this card, I got Reliquary Tower. This is a land card. It says you have no maximum hand size. So, I put this in my deck. This was another gut choice, despite some people telling me it wasn't necessary. But I know myself, okay? I know myself. I know how much I wait to play certain cards, and I know that there's always a chance I may get mana screwed. So, I would hate to have to discard any cards in my hand if my hand gets too big because I end up pulling a lot of my big creatures, right? So Reliquary Tower, if I can manage to get him early enough onto the board, then he works great with something like Wildest Dreams, where I can put X amount, pay X amount of land to get X amount from my graveyard. If I want to pay all my land to get everything out of my graveyard that I want, and I have Reliquary Tower on the board, bam! I just got all my cards back. And it costs me nothing but the mana, and in my opinion, that is worth it to get it all back if I'm really struggling. So that is why I kept Reliquary Tower, and that is why I kept Wildest Dreams. It's cards like that that work well together, and I will not budge. I feel like that could be a very powerful combo if used right, and of course, I may be taking a risk, but you live and you learn, trial and error, and we'll see how it goes. Another one I added to my deck that was mentioned in the Bloomburrow unboxing is Fecund Green Shell. My coworker recommended I put this one in my deck. It is a elemental turtle creature. Who doesn't love a cute turtle? He's a snapper with like exploding flowers on his back. How great is that? It's 5 mana. It's a rare card with reach. As long as you control 10 or more lands, creatures you control get +2/+2. Whenever Fecund Green Shell or another creature you control with toughness greater than its power enters, look at the top card of your library. If it's a land card, you may put it onto the battlefield tapped, otherwise put it into your hand. So this one's good, even though it says put your land card into the battlefield tap, that's fine. Because at this point, you've already gotten 10 lands onto the board. You wouldn't want to play this card until you are reasonably at the 10 lands, in my opinion. I would hate for this sucker to die before I get to use that ability. But even though if you get a land and you can put it on the battlefield tapped, you already have enough land. But if it's not a land, you get whatever's on top and put it in your hand. Here's another good land grab card. Cultivate, costs 3 mana. It's a sorcery. Search your library for up to 2 basic land cards. Reveal those cards and put one onto the battlefield tapped and the other into your hand. Then shuffle your library. This guy is a rager. I had to get him. I wanted the beefy cards for this deck, okay? If I'm gonna make a landfall deck, a mono green landfall deck, I wanted to go hard with all the best known green creatures that I could think of or that friends would mention to me, right? So I got Cultivator Colossus. He costs 7 to cast. He's a mythic plant beast creature. On brand. Okay, on brand. He belongs here. We don't kick him out, okay? We love the giants. We love him. He has Trample. Cultivator Colossus's power and toughness are each equal to the number of lands you control. When Cultivator Colossus enters the battlefield, you may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield tapped. If you do, draw a card and repeat this process. Isn't that great? For 7 lands. He has Trample. He has power and toughness for however many lands you have. If you're paying 7 to play this guy, that's already makes him a 7/7, right? And then not only that, but when he enters, if you have lands in your hand, you can just put them on the board tapped. Basically, all your lands can go onto the board tapped. That, you know what that does though? That every time it enters, it triggers a landfall. You may not get to spend that land, but it will trigger other landfall abilities. So everything that says landfall, when a land enters, do this, triggered. So you may not get to spend the land on anything else, but if you already have something on the board with landfall, boom, free money, okay? Cultivator Colossus is a good one. So 2 cards that my friends recommended to me are Fanatic of Ronus and Dryad of the Elysian Grove. Fanatic of Ronus is 2 mana cost, a snake druid. You can tap him. He's a 1/4 creature, but you probably wouldn't use him to fight. You'd put him on the board, maybe use him to defend some little things, but if you tap him, you add 1 land. Now, if you're playing with a Shia, I don't know if when you tap him, if that counts as 2 lands at that point. Another question, if you guys know the answer to it, that would be helpful. But if you tap him, this basically makes him be able to be a land, even if you didn't have a Shia. So basically with him, whether I have a Shia out of the command zone or not, he's always can be used as a land when I need him. If I have a creature with power 4 or greater, I can tap him to add 4 mana. That seems powerful. That seems not right. Tap, add 4 mana. Activate only if you control a creature with power 4 or greater. I didn't catch that before, but that's kind of a lot. Paying only 2 for him to just sit on the board and then wait till I get a 4/4 creature out there, or a 4/0, 4/1 creature or something, you know, like I just get 4 free land by tapping him. Okay, now I see why my friend told me to get this one. Or he has Eternalize. Pay 4 mana. If you pay 4 mana, exile this card from your graveyard. Create a token that's a copy of it, except it's a 4/4 black zombie snake druid with no mana cost. Eternalize only as a sorcery. Dryad of the Elysian Grove, 3 mana, enchantment creature, nymph dryad. You may play an additional land on each of my turns. Lands you control are every basic land type in addition to their other types. So basically, if I got a bunch of lands in my hand, I can play them all. Because then my hand doesn't get too full while I'm trying to grab other cards, you know? I can pay all those and still keep my hand low. That said, my luck, I'm more likely to get mana screwed, so I don't envision that being as useful necessarily. Another good card someone had me add was Rampaging Beloths, 6 mana. Creature is a beast with Trample, Landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you may create a 4/4 green beast creature token. So basically with Fanatic of Ronus, if I have the Rampaging Beloths, I will almost always have access to a 4/4 creature to be able to get 4 mana each turn from Fanatic of Ronus. I could be misinterpreting that card, but I don't think so. So, another good card for this deck, which has one of the mechanics I wanted, is Return to Nature. It's only 2 mana, but it acts as an instant. I can choose one. Destroy target artifact, destroy target enchantment, or exile target card from a graveyard. So, that's great because, you know, he fits the theme, fits the vibe, but also I can destroy something that may be out onto the board, hurting my creatures, and at a relatively cheap cost. Another good card, Exploration, 1 mana. It's an enchantment, and it says I may play an additional land on each of my turns. So it's like Dryad of the Elysian Grove, and if I really wanted to, I could probably get rid of Dryad of Elysian Grove, because Dryad of Elysian Grove is 3 mana for the exact same ability, but if I had both on the board at the same time, then that means I could play 4 mana per turn if I happen to have it. I don't know if I would ever need that, but the idea I think of keeping both of these in my deck is Let's say I won't pull Dry to the Listen Grove till end game, and Exploration I'll pull in the beginning. So no matter which point of the game I'm in, I'll have access to one of these cards. Or if one of them gets like exiled, you know, I have a backup, right? I also have Roaring Earth. It's a big bear enchantment with costs 2 mana. When you put it on the board, it says whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature or vehicle you control. This is another landfall trigger, so that's great. Every time land enters, you can just buff your creatures, and it's permanent. It's not until end of turn, it's permanent. The other ability this one has, which I'm not fully sure I understand it yet, or if I would ever use it like this, but instead of using it as an enchantment on the board, I can channel it, meaning I can pay 2 mana plus X amount of mana. Where discard Roaring Earth, I put X mana that I paid, +1/+1 counters on target land I control. It becomes a 0/0 green spirit creature with haste. It's still a land. So basically, if I pay a lot, I can make one really strong creature out of a land, or I can put them on the board and slowly buff up other creatures. And I don't know, I think I like the first ability better. Another card I got to finally try out the other day is Court of Bounty. It's 4 mana, it's an enchantment. When Court of Bounty enters the battlefield, I become the monarch. At the beginning of my upkeep, I may put a land card from my hand onto the battlefield. If I'm the monarch, instead, you may put a creature or land card from your hand onto the battlefield. So the way it works from what I was described is that you become the monarch if you attack somebody else. It has to be an attack with your own creatures. If somebody attacks you with their creatures, they become the monarch. The important thing about becoming the monarch is at the end of your turn, you get to at the end of your end step, you get to draw an extra card, and then also at the beginning of your upkeep, you get to play either a land or a creature card onto the battlefield for free. So if I have this out, I can put land out there, and then when my turn starts, like after the upkeep, I can put another land out there. Or if I'm the monarch, instead I can put just a card from my hand. I played this the other day, and I put out so many big creatures that were worth like 6 mana onto the board for free because I was the monarch. That's powerful. I don't have to pay all that mana early game, so if you get Court of Bounty early and you have some heavy cards in your hand, this could work really well. But also other people want to be the monarch, so there's a high chance that they may not want to destroy the enchantment, they just want to utilize the enchantment. So just make sure if you decide to do this, people could take it away from you if you aren't ready to fight them for it. Defense of the Heart, another cool one that was recommended I keep in my deck. It's a 4 mana enchantment, mythic enchantment from the Wilds of Eldraine set. At least this particular card I have. It might be a remake. At the beginning of my upkeep, if an opponent controls 3 or more creatures, sacrifice Defense of the Heart. Search your library for up to 2 creature cards. Put those cards onto the battlefield, then shuffle. I almost got rid of this one from my deck, but I didn't because I realized this is also powerful. It's almost kind of like Court of Bounty. I, at any point, can just look for 2 creature cards that I know are strong and put them onto the board, right? So that one's good. For only 4 mana, that one is good. This card right here, this one almost won me my game the other day. Unnatural Growth. Unnatural Growth paired with the Court of Bounty was just a great combination. Unnatural Growth is 5 mana to play. It's an enchantment. At the beginning of each combat, double the power and toughness of each creature you control until end of turn. Immediately, like, someone is gonna try and get rid of this card. I know it, if they really see how strong this is. Because I had Roaring Earth, Court of Bounty, and this card out. So every turn I was buffing my creatures. I would have like 3 6/6 creatures on the board. Double them in one combat. That's 36 damage 1 turn just because of Unnatural Growth. Insanity, right? Insanity. So that was a good card. I'm not getting rid of that one. Zendikar's Royal is also good. Someone recommended me this one, so this one's in my deck. 5 mana. It's another enchantment with landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, create a 2/2 green elemental creature token. That one helps. This enchantment sitting on the board helps me if I am not able to play a bunch of small creatures, because I don't really have like a ton of small creatures if I'm being honest, but I have this in there so that way when I'm stuck in those moments I can passively get free creatures, and that's good. That's good in a deck where I'm wanting to make a bunch of big creatures, but I also don't want to waste my time on a bunch of puny things that'll get stomped super easy. Tameo Safekeeping, the reason I put this one in my deck was because it's an instant that only costs 1 mana. Target permanent you control gains hexproof and indestructible until end of turn, and I gain 2 life. A permanent with hexproof and indestructible can't be the target of spells or abilities your opponents control. Damage and effects that say destroy don't destroy it. So basically, this is another protective ability that I was looking for in my deck to make sure that people don't just automatically start targeting my big guys when I want to use them. So chances of me always getting these types of cards when I need them may be slim, but I have a few in there to account for that because I want to protect my commander and I want to protect my big guys at least long enough for me to do something with them, right? I also have a Void Fate. 1 mana, it's an instant. Counter target instant or aura spell that targets a permanent you control. I put this in there because I was like, if you're about to destroy my creature, too bad, I'm destroying your spell. And I didn't want to remove this one either because this is exactly what I was looking for. If I could have copies of this card on my deck, I would. This is another one that doesn't really fit on brand, but he was too good. For only 1 mana, too good. I do have a Planeswalker in here, and I'd be totally down to not include this, but I figured I'm not really as familiar with Planeswalkers, and I thought this would be a good chance for me to have one. So I have Jiang Yonggu, and I know people wanted me to add Nissa, and I don't know. I don't understand Planeswalkers enough to know why she would be better, but I liked him because his abilities are target creature gets +2/+2 until end of turn. If I don't control a creature named Mawu, create a legendary 3/3 green hound creature token named Mawu. Or until end of turn, target creature gains trample and gets +X/+X, where X is the number of lands I control. That right there, it seems to fit perfectly into my deck, so I wanted that. But if you have any tips for how to run him with Mawu, that would be great, because I'm just still new to Planeswalkers. Some 2 big guys, 3 big guys, 4 big guys I picked just because I wanted to was Woodfall Primus. Costs 8 mana. He's a Treefolk Shaman. Imagine if I have Court to Bounty when I pull this guy. He's going smack on the board, and I'm like, boom. And then imagine him with my Natural Growth. He has Trample. When Woodfall Primus enters the battlefield, destroy target non-creature permanent. Boom. He doesn't just have Trample and isn't just strong. He also has Persist. I remember I added this guy because of Persist. When this creature dies, if it had no -1/-1 counters on it, return it to the battlefield under its owner's control with a -1/-1 counter on it. Smack, put him back on the board. And then if I trigger one of my landfall abilities that gives him a +1/+1, I can constantly bring him back. You know, I can bring this guy back. So he is one that I would want to have out there with one of my landfall abilities that add a +1/+1 counter, because then he won't be -1/-1s anymore. Also got Craterhoof Behemoth, another 8 mana card. Only 5/5, so he's 1 less power toughness than Woodfall Primus, but why? Why is he in this deck? Because he's a beast with haste. When he enters the battlefield, creatures you control gain trample and get +X/+X until the end of turn, where X is the number of creatures I control. So he's one I would want to have out there when I got other creatures out there. Gotta play him right, but he's strong. I have Aggressive Mammoth. So I am shocked that this card is worth less than those other cards, because he's only 6 mana with an 8/8. He's 8/8 for 6 mana, which is already like cost difference just for power and toughness better than Woodfall Primus and Craterhoof Behemoth alone. And he has Trample, and other creatures I control have Trample. I don't know why this card isn't talked about enough, because he's too good. I mean, people will try to destroy him pretty quickly, but that's literally, combine this with a Natural Growth, and that's a 16/16 creature right there. He was a me pick. I picked this guy, and he's staying. Molimo Marrow Sorcerer, 7 mana to play, and another one where his power toughness is based on lands you control. We love creatures like that here in this deck. He's an elemental with trample as well. If you look at him, he's like a green tree plant walking dude. He's perfect. I also have Arboreal Grazer. This this is a debatable option. People probably will judge me for putting this one in here. It's 1 mana, 0/3, so he cannot fight, he can only defend. He has reach. When Arboreal Grazer enters the battlefield, I may put a land card from my hand onto the battlefield tapped. So not only is he kind of useless, even though he has reach, but he only brings land in tapped. I mean, he triggers a landfall, but it comes in tapped. But I picked him because not only is he cheap, he's a sloth, and a really derpy looking sloth. And I love sloths, okay? But, I mean, is he a sloth? Maybe he's not a sloth, but someone told me he was a sloth. He's got the sloth vibes. I'm just gonna pretend he's a sloth, okay? Now, granted, this thing has a really weirdly long lemur's tail and ram horns on its head and strange ears, and none of those things sloths have, nor do sloths have a cow snout, but it's reminiscent. I also have Courser of Krufix. I like this one. It says, play the top card of my library revealed. You may play lands from the top of my library. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you gain 1 life. I liked this one because I gain life when land enters, and I didn't find many cards that had that ability. Again, I could be wrong, but if you find something that's similar to this, I would not mind replacing this one. I just really like the idea that, you know, with my landfall triggers, I can gain a bunch of life. Someone recommended I get Scute Swarm. It's only 3 mana. It's an insect creature with landfall. When a land enters the battlefield under your control, create a 1/1 green insect creature token. If you control 6 or more lands, create a token that's a copy of Scute Swarm instead. So this helps because I can trigger basically 2 insect creatures per turn if I have 2 Scute Swarms on the board. And then also I have a lot of land, so it's going to trigger a lot. And this is a good idea also for someone to recommend to me because, as I said earlier, it's good to have a card like this when I don't plan on having a ton of little creatures and only big ones. This is also like passive creature income. Any cards like that work well. Oran Reef Hydra. This guy doesn't really fit the look of it, but he's 6 mana, a 5/5, but I picked him because he's another tough guy. He has Trample and Landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on Oran Reef Hydra. If that land is a forest, put 2 +1/+1 counters on Oran Reef Hydra instead. So every time I enter a land, he gets strong twice over. So he's in there. Okay, this card right here, I paid good money for this guy. I think he's my most expensive card. It's a sorcery called Reshape the Earth. It's 9 mana, a mythic. Search my library for up to 10 land cards. Put them onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. I picked this one because this is like the end game card right here, man. You want to play this card when you have a lot of good landfall triggers ready on the board, when you already have some good land on the board, because I mean, let's be real, you won't be able to play him without enough anyway. But that's 10 counters if you have a enchantment with +1/+1 counters every time a land enters. That's 10 of any power toughness for any of your big creatures, for Ashaya, my commander. So that's 10 life if I have Courser of Krufix out there. That is so useful. And then not only does it add 10, but then you get just 10 more to spend if you need it. Like, you could use this as a bomb, but you could also use it if you're really struggling for enough land to trigger your other effects, right? So yeah, anyway, Reshape the Earth is really powerful, and I just had to add this one to my deck. So in hindsight, after looking at a lot of these cards, there are some I found that I didn't really read out loud that I considered removing or replacing, or maybe I had too many of the same type. So I've become a little bit more open to kind of switching stuff around since creating this deck, because now that I've played a little bit more since making it, I'm seeing where there are definitely some better cards out there than what I originally had. But I was also trying to stay within a budget, so I didn't want to buy too many expensive cards. But I did get some good ones in the Bloomburrow set I think I want to add here, not just Scrap Shooter. But anyway, I will drop all the cards in my commander deck in the description of the video below, so you can review them, tell me what you liked, what you don't like. If you have a mono green landfall deck or just any landfall deck, what is your favorite card to run in it? What is your favorite commander for landfall or mono green deck? I'd love to hear it because, as I said in my previous video, forests is my favorite card type. If I could only ever play forests all the time, I probably would. Almost every deck I ever play will have some combination with forest in it because I just like that play style so much. It's just simple to me. I get it. It makes sense, and it's it's on brand. And I just like everything about the colors, the art, the creatures. Like, they always design forest cards really well to me. So I'm a forest stan. Okay, we stan the forest here. But yeah, that's all I have for you guys today. So I hope you enjoyed this video and found it to be helpful, and I hope to see you guys again soon.